And we're going to talk about 10 Civil War foods every prepper should know and try. The American Civil War was fought between the North and the South, divided only by the Mason-Dixon line on a map. This war was a major turn in American history where brothers fought against brothers. The Civil War had two sides, the Confederate South and the Union North. Confederate states seceded from America to form their own free country where slave work was legal. The Union fought to keep the country united, and the war ended in their favor in 1865, 4 years after the start of the war. Food rations were scarce and not favored by Union or Confederate soldiers. But so here's 10 Civil War foods every prepper should know about, and at least try. And of course, beef jerky is one. And chances are you had beef jerky at some point in time. Store-bought varieties are found all over the supermarket, many different flavors. By making beef jerky at home, you will get a better idea of what exactly Civil War soldiers were eating. Of course, beef jerky is a dried product that allowed it to last a long time in a soldier's satchel. By removing the moisture from the meat, bacteria cannot multiply as quickly, thus ensuring a long lastability. There are tons of simple recipes out there for drying beef without the use of special equipment, giving you the best idea of what 1860 soldiers ate on the move. Then there's beef or chicken tea. Yes, meat tea is a thing. It was an important drink that provided Civil War soldiers with nutrients and protein without much effort. Beef tea is a flavorful, concentrated beef stock made with organs, bones, meat, and connective tissue left over from farming cattle. Soldiers either made this recipe their own or drink provided beef tea. Next, we got captured cattle. And then there's a disclaimer here saying, about not advocating for the theft of other farmers' animals in today's world. However, during Civil War times, it was common for soldiers, especially Confederates, to steal cattle from local farms. Confederate soldiers were not provided with food on a regular basis as Union soldiers, so they had to get thrifty to survive. Pigs, goats, sheep, and chickens were all borrowed during this time to feed famished fighters of the war. Soldiers could also rely on the kindness of farmers to give animals if they were on the same of the war, that is. So there you have it. That there's a few things right there already that a lot of us probably already use today, or some with beef jerky and of course beef, the cattle. Of course, we don't steal them. But the next on the list, guys, is cornbread, and everybody likes cornbread, right? Cornmeal mixed with water and baked over an open fire was about as homemade as food got during the Civil War. Cornbread would not be consumed long after its freshness and moisture evaporated. Just so the soldiers did not work on an empty stomach, some Confederate soldiers even cooked their cornbread on their muskets. They turned cornmeal into a dough, then wrapped it around the ramrod for grilling. The results were carried but completely edible. Next, dried fruits and vegetables. Dried fruit was harder to come by, yet dried vegetables were much less favored. Vegetables without moisture were unpalatable to soldiers of both sides and needed to be cooked or soaked before eating. Foraged produce. Of course, this is where foraging comes in. It's good that they even know this, this is where all this comes from, our forefathers. Soldiers, especially in the South, often ran out of food before more was provided. They often reveled in the kindness of strangers who would set up food stands right outside battlefields. If food was not provided, soldiers needed to forage to survive. Southern soldiers would forage anything they could find. Dandelions, berries, wild onions, and small animals were among the few. Union soldiers luckily did not come across food shortages often. Today, foraging is a fun practice that provides tasty foods for cheap. Bring along a guide to ensure you are foraging and eating edible foods, though. Most of us, I think, here in this chat would know some edible foods. You may have heard of this stuff when we're talking about hardtack now, guys, before, as it has gotten humanity through many times of starvation. Hardtack is a mixture of wheat flour and water, cooked or baked over a flame, and then dried for easy carrying. Oranges, guys, to fight off scurvy and the terrible symptoms that come with it. Consuming oranges was a big deal for Civil War soldiers. The fruit was provided more in the North, leading to healthier living standards for Union soldiers. Worrying about a scurvy is a thing of the past, but oranges are still a healthy, tasty fruit to keep around. Oh, now here's something. All right, salt pork. Back in the 1860s, salt pork was widely regarded as bacon. The bacon we know today is a smoked cured meat that we crisp up during cooking. Back then, it was a general term for dried, salted hog meat. Salt pork was easily transported and often contained undesirable cuts of meat such as connective tissue and organ meat. You can still find salt pork today, sans organ meat. And of course, then there's wild game. Soldiers already had guns and weapons, so they used them for hunting in desperate times. Confederate soldiers hunted any wild game they could find, such as turkeys, wild hogs, and geese. Hunting and foraging were much more common in the South among soldiers. Many folks still hunt wild game to this day and much prefer the flavor to store-bought meats. One more thing. Even if it's not a food, everyone's favorite wake-up juice was bought, bartered, and traded in Civil War times. Coffee was inexpensive, tasty, and kept soldiers awake during long travels. It was also stayed fresh for a while and was easy to carry around. Union soldiers often had commissaries where they would buy coffee, whereas Confederate soldiers did not. During battle downtimes, Union soldiers would trade coffee with Confederates for tobacco, a Confederate crop that was in short supply up north. The Civil War was a dark time in American history, dividing the nation into two angry sides. The Union soldiers were well provided for, although some foods were not very pleasing. Confederate soldiers were significantly less well off. The need to forage, steal, hunt, and trade were much more prevalent in the South to avoid starvation as the war raged on. Now give these Civil War era foods a try and you'll be able to briefly empathize with the hardships of the 1860s war times. Guys, there you have it, 10 Civil War foods that every prepper should know and try. Thank you very much.